What happens when a secret changes everything overnight? Linda discovers she's pregnant, but she's terrified to tell Quang, unsure if love can survive the weight of such a truth. Hello everyone, hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to explore an emotional turning point between Linda and Quang, where fear, love, and responsibility collide in the most unexpected way. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. The morning light slipped quietly through the curtains, soft and pale, but Linda had already been awake for a while. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, her body feeling heavier than usual. Not painful, just wrong. Her stomach churned slightly. A dull nausea lingered in her chest, the kind that didn't quite hurt but refused to go away. She turned onto her side, pressing her palm against her abdomen as if that might calm whatever was happening inside her. It's probably stress, she whispered to herself. The past few weeks had been exhausting. Meetings, deadlines, decisions stacked on top of decisions. Being Linda meant always being composed, always being in control. She had learned long ago not to complain unless something was truly serious. Still, this morning felt different. She slowly pushed herself up and walked toward the bathroom. The mirror reflected a face that looked tired, not sick, just drained. Her lips were pale, her eyes slightly unfocused. She splashed cold water on her face, hoping it would wake her up, but the unease stayed. From the kitchen, she could hear Quang moving around, the sound of cups clinking, the kettle, familiar, grounding noises. Quang always woke up earlier than her. No matter how late he slept, he somehow found the energy to start the day calmly. It was one of the things she admired about him, his steadiness. When Linda stepped into the kitchen, Quang immediately noticed her. "You're up early," he said, glancing at her face. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep anymore." Quang didn't press. He never did. Instead, he poured her a cup of warm ginger tea and slid it across the table. "Drink this first," he said gently. "You've been skipping breakfast lately." Linda wrapped her hands around the cup. The warmth seeped into her palms, comforting but unfamiliar. She took a small sip, then paused. The smell made her stomach twist again. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her expression neutral. Quang noticed. "You don't like it today?" he asked. "It's fine," she replied softly. "Maybe I'm just not hungry." He studied her for a second longer than usual. Not suspicious, just concerned. "You've been like this for a few days," he said. "Tired, quiet." Linda looked away. "I'm okay, Quang, really." She hated lying to him, but she hated uncertainty even more. Later that morning, after Quang left for the site, the apartment felt unusually silent. Linda sat alone on the couch, her laptop open but untouched, emails blurred together. Numbers didn't make sense. Her focus kept drifting back to the same thought she had been avoiding since the moment she woke up. Her period was late, not by a day, not by two. Long enough for the thought to become impossible to ignore. She stood up slowly, her heart beginning to race for reasons she couldn't fully explain. From the drawer in the bathroom, she pulled out a small box she had bought days ago but never opened. She stared at it for a long moment. "So dramatic," she muttered to herself, trying to laugh it off. But her hands were shaking as she opened it. The bathroom felt colder than usual. Every sound seemed louder. The ticking of the clock, her own breathing. She followed the instructions carefully, almost mechanically. as if doing this without emotion would somehow make the result easier to accept. Then came the waiting. 1 minute felt like 10. Linda sat on the edge of the bathtub, her elbows resting on her knees, her fingers laced tightly together. Her mind raced ahead uncontrollably. What if it's nothing? What if it's real? What if everything changes? She had built her life carefully, step by step. She had plans, goals, responsibilities. Being strong had always been her survival skill. She wasn't sure where a baby fit into that picture. When the timer went off, she didn't move right away. She closed her eyes. Then, slowly, she turned. 2 lines, clear, undeniable. For a second, Linda couldn't breathe. Her knees weakened, and she slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the cabinet. The test trembled in her hand as her vision blurred with tears she didn't remember allowing. She wasn't crying loudly, just silently, as if afraid even her emotions might be too much. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. The words felt unreal, floating in the air without weight. A mix of emotions crashed into her all at once: shock, fear, disbelief, and somewhere deep beneath it all, a fragile spark of warmth she didn't dare name yet. Her mind immediately went to Quang, his face, his responsibilities, the pressure he already carried. Would this make him happy, or would it become another burden? Linda pressed her hand against her stomach again, her touch hesitant, uncertain. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said quietly. "I don't know if you're ready either." By the time Quang came home that evening, Linda had composed herself. The test was hidden away, her tears wiped dry, her expression calm, almost too calm. Quang sensed it immediately. She was there, but she wasn't really there. "Did something happen today?" he asked while taking off his jacket. Linda forced a small smile. "No, just a normal day." Quang didn't respond right away. He stepped closer, his voice softer. "Linda, you know you don't have to carry things alone, right?" She met his eyes, and for a split second she almost told him everything. Almost. But then fear tightened her chest. "I know," she said. "I just need a little time." Quang nodded, though worry lingered in his gaze. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm here whenever you're ready." Linda turned away, her hand instinctively drifting back to her stomach. She didn't know how long she could keep this secret. And she didn't know what would happen once the truth finally came out. That night, Linda barely slept. She lay on her side, facing away from Quang, listening to his steady breathing. Every inhale, every exhale reminded her how calm he looked, how safe everything seemed on the surface. And yet, inside her, nothing was calm. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach, fingers unmoving, as if touching too firmly might make everything suddenly real. The word pregnant echoed in her mind over and over again, refusing to fade. By morning, she had made a decision, not a final one, just a small step forward. At breakfast, Quang noticed immediately. Linda barely touched her food. "You didn't eat much yesterday either," he said, trying to sound casual. "Is your stomach still bothering you?" She hesitated for half a second too long. "A little," she replied. Quang put his chopsticks down. "Linda." The way he said her name made her heart sink. She looked up. His eyes weren't demanding. They were worried. "You've been distant," he continued, "and I know you. When something's wrong, you don't say it until it's already heavy." She swallowed. "I just need time to think." "About what?" Silence stretched between them. Linda felt the words pressing against her chest, begging to be released. But fear kept them locked inside. Fear of changing everything. Fear of choosing the wrong moment. Quang reached across the table and gently held her hand. "You don't have to tell me now," he said softly, "but please don't carry it alone." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. Later that afternoon, they went to the construction site together. Linda said she wanted to get some air, but in truth, she needed movement, something to quiet the storm in her mind. The site was loud, busy, full of life and momentum. Workers moved with purpose, machines roared, plans unfolded in real time. This was Quang's world, a world built on pressure, responsibility, and constant decision-making. As Linda watched him talk to the team, confident and focused, her chest tightened again. "How can I add something this big to his life right now?" she wondered. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hit her. Her vision blurred. The noise faded. "Linda!" Quang's voice cut through everything. She swayed slightly, instinctively grabbing the edge of a table. "I'm okay," she said quickly, though her face said otherwise. Quang was already beside her. "No, you're not," he said firmly. "Sit down." She tried to protest, but the nausea came fast and strong. Quang guided her away from the site, his hand steady at her back. In the quiet of the car, the tension finally broke. "Enough," he said, turning to face her. "Something is wrong. Tell me." Linda stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She reached into her bag. For a moment, Quang didn't understand what she was holding. Then he did. His breath caught. The pregnancy test lay in her palm, simple and unmistakable. 2 lines. "What is this?" he asked slowly. Linda's voice trembled. "I didn't know how to tell you." The silence that followed felt endless. Quang stared at the test, then at her, then back again, as if trying to make sense of something that had arrived without warning. "You're pregnant?" he asked quietly. She nodded, tears finally spilling. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared it would be too much. For you. For us." Quang leaned back against the seat, running a hand through his hair. His expression was unreadable. Not angry, not happy, just overwhelmed. Linda's heart sank. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "if this isn't what you wanted." "Linda," he interrupted. She stopped. His voice was low, steady, but emotional in a way she rarely heard. "I'm shocked," he said honestly. "Yes, I didn't expect this. Not now." Her chest tightened painfully. "But," he continued, turning to face her fully, "that doesn't mean I don't want it." She looked up, startled. Quang reached for her hands, holding them firmly. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I worry about whether I can protect you enough, whether I can balance everything." He paused, then softened. "But the idea of you going through this alone?" He shook his head. "That scares me more." Linda broke down then, not from fear, but relief. "I didn't want to be a burden," she cried. Quang pulled her into his arms without hesitation. "You're not a burden," he said, holding her tightly. "You're my family." They stayed like that for a long time, the world outside the car fading into the background. Finally, Linda whispered, "What do we do now?" Quang rested his forehead against hers. "Now," he said, "we take it one step at a time, together." Linda nodded, her hand returning to her stomach, this time with less fear. But even as comfort settled in, a new uncertainty quietly emerged. Life would change, plans would shift, and nothing would ever be the same again.
Xin chào mọi người. Trong tập này, Linda và bà Linda và Linda theo bà và cậu cháu ra nương mía. Dưới nắng sớm, bà vừa chặt mía vừa kể chuyện ngày xưa. Dậy à, chặt 3 hoặc 4 khúc cho đẹp để bán được giá. Đồng mía cao dần, 45 đồng trở thành hy vọng cho phiên chợ. Một cây mía đổ bất ngờ khiến khiến cả nhóm kêu, rồi cười xòa vì kịp đỡ nhau. Chiều xuống, Linda buồn bã vì con rúi của mình đã biến mất, nghi có kẻ trộm rình quanh nhà. CEO Quang ghé đến lắng nghe và trấn an và tự sửa chiếc camera cũ trong kho, kéo dây lắp trước sân nhà để bảo vệ cô. Đêm đến, Linda nấu cơm nếp cẩm mời anh ở lại ăn. Hai người trò chuyện lòng ấm lại. Quang kể áp lực công ty, camera nháy sáng, bóng lạ thoáng qua, và không biết Linda có sống sót qua được đêm nay không. Mọi người nếu thấy video hay, hãy cho mình một like, một subscribe. Cảm ơn mọi người nhé.